Well, hello everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of CrossWorlds, the show where we put the metaverse in focus, looking at the future of immersive spaces and things beyond. Tonight's guest is the author of a celebrated blog called Yugo Trade, and she's somebody I met first in Second Life, where of course we filmed this. And I think could be said we were sort of some of the original sort of evangelists was the phrase they used for sort of immersive spaces and whatever. Since then, Tish has gone on to cover a lot of technology, including things like augmented reality and the mobile internet. And we will be discussing, I think, a little bit about the metaverse today, but also a little bit about beyond it and where things might be going in the future and where we'll see patterns of convergence and things like that emerge. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce her and ask her to sort of just give a brief background about herself. So her name is Tish Shute, and welcome, Tish.
Hi, welcome, Mal. I'm really actually happy to be back in Second Life after quite a long time. My avatar's not looking its best because of this, but it's great to be here. And you'd like me to give a bit of background? Okay. Well, I think, I've actually been working with, augmented reality and aspects of virtual reality my whole career. I began in film. And back in the day, we basically created many of the things we're seeing now, like Second Life and like augmented reality HUDs and experiences on film as futuristic experiences, much as they were created in science fiction and became popular there. But, in the last, as soon as these things became doable, and so pretty much since the 90s, I've been, working not so much in film, but in really trying to make these technologies an experience for us all, not just a movie or fictional experience. So, and I think really, it's interesting, because we have to focus, you can't do everything. So I think sometimes we don't realize how connected, immersive spaces are with ideas of augmented reality. I was looking for the famous graph that has virtual reality at one end and augmented reality at the other end, and of course we're just really we're on a spectrum. Augmented reality, you're trying to enhance the perception of of your perceived or lived reality, and virtual reality is at the end of simulation. But it's it is really a spectrum, and I think we're approaching the time now where we really get a blend of these experiences, and that's where it's got really interesting. And interesting enough, when I was in Second Life a lot, if you know me and you ran into me, I was always blogging about ways we could connect to the real world. Do you remember the space that Oliver Go started, the Shasper Island, and he was doing...
Crumbs.
You remember?
Yes, a long while ago, it seems. Yes, indeed, I do, yeah.
And actually, if, people who've been in Second Life a long time will remember that there was enormous enthusiasm early on, rightly so, for connecting the real world and virtual worlds. And Shasper was one project doing lots of, things about, the smart homes and IBM. Do you remember IBM's work on virtual control centers, and there was a ton of excitement around that. And I think, it's very interesting because, when I was in Second Life, I spent a lot of time thinking about the real world. But now I'm working mostly, as Mal pointed out, in augmented reality. And I spend a lot of time thinking, well, how would we do virtual things to kind of enhance those experiences? Because if you think about it, I mean, if you're doing a mobile game, right? The part of the experience, I mean, you can't always be, just a sort of typical city game, might be a scavenger hunt running around the city and finding things, but not all of us have time to spend our time running to real locations. The blend between the virtual and the real is very interesting. So I still am thinking about the same things, although I think one of the things, why I spend less time in Second Life and more on mobile is it was extremely exciting for me when we've got the iPhone and the compass and the GPS, and now we've got the ability to tag media to the world with, basically software and SDKs that are sort of glue programs that allow you to just, tie a 3D model to a specific location or object or graphic, not just a marker. So that, if you know my history, you would have known that'd be super exciting to me, and I would just dive in. And the minute I saw basically the early the early possibilities of that, I've been very focused on it. But to me, it is still a spectrum, and I still think about this intersection of the virtual and the real just as much as I did in Second Life. And I mean, it's very interesting I don't know anyone listening who's ever heard of this event I organize called Augmented Reality Event, and that's my two co-organizers. One is Ori Inbar, who runs Augmento, which is the first VC-funded augmented reality game company. The other is Chris Grayson, and I can't remember his avatar name, but Chris is very familiar with Second Life and got excited by virtual worlds. And that's a big event. We have a lot of fun at that event, and actually, because some of the very same skills that were useful in Second Life, we see a lot of Second Life developers in that space too. A number of the startups in augmented reality are Second Lifers. Some of the best work being done in augmented reality is developers that came out of the Second Life space. Patrick O'Shaughnessy's done some amazing work in the museum in New York City, and he's done, if you look at his site, Patched Reality, you'll see some of the cool stuff he's done. And he's, of course, was the CTO of Second Life. So if you, Electric Sheep, that was a slip. Second Life and Electric Sheep were very, very linked at one point, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, there was, there was Electric Sheep, what were the other big companies at the time?
Rivers Run Red, probably.
Rivers Run Red, and who was the others? Well, you know better than I. Millions of Us.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
But there were a few. God, can you think of more, Mal? Because there were a few.
There were quite a lot. In fact, when I wrapped my brains and started thinking of people doing things in Second Life a few years ago, there was Nick Wilson and Metaverse, for example. Which,
yes!
I mean, that evolved. In fact, I think I first met you through that group.
That was how you met me, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, that evolved into a whole load of things, the program Metanomics and all sorts of groups here or wherever. But they've also dissolved into this giant fabric of what Second Life is now. It's sort of interesting. It's not so much the community because it's too big. You really have to sort of dive in until you find your niches. But I was very curious what you were saying. Do you remember there used to be a debate about something in retrospect, I certainly don't really agree with, but it was the augmentation versus immersion debate.
Oh, yes.
And
so that's what I'm sort of alluding to in another way.
I actually tend to say, you can use virtual spaces, immersive spaces, to augment your life, or role play, or just escapism and entertainment. But I think one of the things that is characteristic about these environments is that they are immersive. Immersion is actually a prerequisite. We call them immersive spaces. Yeah. And, for a long time, you and me and many others were saying, this is the future. You could, I think it was Christian Renner who said, he first said that, when you're in one of these places, the thing you feel first is presence. You're actually present with other people. And there's a close proximity to the people in the room, the virtual room with you, unlike, say, Facebook, where you're present with 5 billion other people and you don't really know who's who.
Yes.
So I always saw immersion as a prerequisite. And what I found interesting in the last few years is how that evangelism, if you like, it sometimes feels to me like it's been hijacked a bit by mobile technologies. Suddenly, we've got a generation of smartphones that really are mini computers, and of course we've now got the pad computing thing, the iPad, the Android pads, both of which will probably be able to run things like Second Life. So we're in a we're in a middle ground, so to speak. But I'm very curious to know where the I think a lot about where the convergence is going to come, because at one point I was thinking, right, here's my desktop, extend it into a dream of holography. But, I will simply go to a place, meet and work with people, and I'll pull up the web and all the other things I need as widgets in that environment. And one of the things we used to promote, as I'm sure you remember, about virtual environments is cut down on commuting, cut down on using up petroleum to travel around. We shouldn't need to travel as much when we can do almost all these things virtually. But in the real world, unfortunately, people are still apt to travel, and they are adopting technologies that they can carry around with them that do a lot of things, but are actually less immersive. It's almost like, I know a lot of people are actually scared of the immersion, you can see why they go for the mobile tech. But, I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, because you talk to a lot of people in the real world, mobile augmented industry. And do you see the immersion element coming together with the way we're going mobile, or
okay? Well, I think you've hit on the exact topic that's really fascinating here. And I think what it is, and I wish I had it's the only thing that that old drag and drop an image for someone in Skype. Actually, I don't have the image on my fingertips anyway. But if you take this spectrum, and you're exactly right that we have the immersive on one end, right, and we have augmented reality on completely the other end. It's augmentations on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. And you're right, in Second Life, you're absolutely right, this was a huge debate, wasn't it? It was like, how important was it to really define this space as fully immersive? And it came up with lots of discussions about whether people should use real names or not, right? And these are key debates to this moment, in this moment, still, regardless of Second Life, the idea of the power of how anonymity has enabled the web and how the mobile space is the exact opposite of anonymity. It's quite completely, you've got no privacy, right? Yeah. So it's a fascinating debate, and it is exactly how we understand these kind of combinations of virtual and real is how the next generation of technology will be shaped. Now, I have a take on this that I think, because what's fascinating is I think you're talking about, I remember this, and what we used to hold a group, didn't we, about immersive versus augmentation, right? And that discussion it's very interesting that, I think Second Life, in order to define itself, actually most people who have really shaped Second Life, they spent a lot of time accentuating the immersive aspects of it, as you say, trying not to dilute them as something else, but really accentuate and define the space around that. Now, interestingly enough, what I've been doing in augmented reality to begin with, because it was a new space in the, until we had the smartphones, it was only something done in labs, right? I've spent a lot of time actually defining it exactly against that, about, what's augmented reality, what's fundamental to it, right, that has nothing to do with immersion, actually, but is about keeping you immersed in reality as opposed to the simulation. But that, I think, is very much how technologies emerge. First, you define what is their essence, right? But actually, the way this is going to play out, I think, is that we'll have to rethink both ends of the spectrum. And you're right that, what's key about, particularly Second Life, is the first sort of really popular immersive technology that worked, right? I mean, in terms of of open, an open communication platform. I mean, obviously, World of Warcraft and things like that are very immersive, but it's the openness of Second Life that I think makes it different, right? In terms of, sorry, go on.
And user generation as well.
And the user-generated content, so that's key. But I think, when it boils down to it, actually, we never either want to be completely immersed or completely without the amazing experiences that immersion brings. That's the reality. I mean, no one wants to live in a simulation, and no one wants to do without the pleasures of a simulation. But, I mean, it's very interesting because I think you're right. In Second Life, a lot of energy has been spent to define it. And as you say, you're one of the people who really understands what its strengths. It's like collapsing of geography. I'm hyper impressed, actually, just coming back, how nice the experience is, because I spend quite a bit of time in WebEx now, and it drives me crazy. I don't know. I have not been having a good experience with that, in terms of its actual experience. So some of these goals seem to be quite nicely being achieved in Second Life, that it's this space that enables this sort of special kind of presence and communication across geography, and that the creativity brought by by having the ability to, create your presence and your avatar. I mean, I was kind of upset that my avatar was messed up.
Indeed.
But I was, I spent a little time last night trying to sort it out, but I didn't. But anyway.
Well, we relate to them, Yes. I don't know what it is, but, after you've been in your avatar for a while, you feel you're inhabiting it, and, if it changes, you don't like it.
No, you don't. It's interesting. I really didn't. I mean, it was just, I was prepared to spend time trying to do the correction, not successfully. But I think in the long run, as you say, because you asked where these technologies are going. And there is the whole debate, if you ever talk about augmented reality, there's this whole thing about the eyewear. The eyewear is the kind of bugaboo of augmented reality, because eyewear is where obviously these things come together, because then augmented reality easily crosses into an immersive experience. That's where it will become seamless. But there's many people who think that's not so good, and that what's powerful about augmented reality has nothing to do with the visual, and that it's about making reality feel different as opposed to look different. Now, I think it's going to be, these are more debates around defining things, like they serve to define these areas so that we can create something. If you didn't know what you wanted Second Life to be, what defined it, I don't think you would have a clear path to sort of inspire you to build along. That's why I think a lot of energy was and is still put on developing what's unique to it, and that's the immersive. But I think the reality is, if you look at our future as sort of networked, augmented human beings, right? It's not going to be, we're not going to live in either one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of the augmented reality, like the layer stuff particularly. It's to me, it's almost a bit like the web. It's just very quick access to data, and actually being able to overlay it on our everyday experiences. I can see it make, there's prototype, you can go into, I think it was in Japan, isn't it, where Tesco, the British supermarket, opened up a supermarket in the metro. And it works completely with phones. You actually go, while you're waiting for your train, you actually do your shopping by pointing your camera at wall displays, finding out information, placing your order, and then by the time you get your train home, the order's there for you. So instead of going round a supermarket, they bring the supermarket to you on the platform while you're waiting, and they use the augmented layers to give you all the information you need. Yeah. And and this is clearly a commercial operation. I don't know how well it's doing, and I think it's just Japan at the moment. But these, to me, are really just ways to reference information. Now, there have been a few things that you're probably aware of. There's a rather unfortunate-looking virtual world called Twinity,
Oh, what's it called? I'm actually not aware of it. What is it called?
It's called Twinity, and it's basically it's a bit cartoony, and have cartoon balloons where the words should be and stuff like that. So it's impossible to film in, for example, but. It was designed to mimic the real world. It was the first virtual space that was intended to be a mirror world, if you like.
Right.
Then we had tourist destination projects like Blue Mars that was going to bring you into all sorts of wonderful National Geographic builds done virtually, which has gone the other way. And that, as you probably know, has certainly gone to mobile reality.
Yeah.
And I was quite fascinated, for example, that Blue Mars has evolved to the point where you can customize your avatar in Blue Mars now, but you can then meet your fellow avatars in Google Maps, or rather Google Street View.
Yeah.
So this idea, the avatar, becoming of a place, even though the place is Google Street View, so it's not pure fiction. Yeah. I see a sort of joining of things here, and there's another mirror world that I'm not sure will ever take off, but I was in the beta of, which you came into it. It looked like Google Maps, but it was all open source. But when you actually hit a target, you go under the clouds, and as you come out of the cloud layer, it all becomes virtual. And it was like a 3D wiki where people from all over the world.
What's that called? That's called.
Well, the company behind it called Mikazook, but it's still called Project X, believe it or not. Very original name there. Yeah. But they're all examples of a kind of virtualization which really is totally embedded in mimicking real life. Trinity, in its cartoony way, wants to have every Leicester Square location perfect at the neighbouring Piccadilly Circus and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And the same with anything, of course, that's modeled on Google Maps or an independent mapping system. So, with satellite delivery and things like that, it's something actually that I don't know, and I'm pretty sure you probably do. Do you see things developing? I guess it's geotagging type of stuff, where we will. In ways be able to achieve a kind of virtual presence using these augmented systems.
But it's interesting. This again goes back to conversations we had 4 years ago on Second Life, right? Isn't it? Because I think then again it was we had a lot of discussions about would the metaverse be something mapped on Google Earth, or would it be something more like Second Life, right? And, I think it's going to be much more heterogeneous than all of that. That basically, you see, there's some things that are really awesome to do in a full simulation, right? Mm. And there's some things that are much better when you have, nothing between you and the world, or as little as possible, right? And I think that's the way it's going to be. And we're going to, at the minute, because we basically have a fairly limited tool set, right? These things the dots don't connect very well. And you're right that the majority of augmented reality that sort of people, everyday, people with their smartphone are exposed to is none too exciting if it's, built off a compass GPS post-it or, which is, kind of hovers some 50 meters from some location. Now, there is, now, as I said, these sort of glue SDKs that are available. So I think even Leia has one now, and 3D modeling tools, so you can do more. But in the end, we need a more sophisticated tool stack to really, make a kind of visual augmentation connect really with our own experiences in an interesting way. And I think, if you're in virtual worlds, what's amazing is that it's a fully instrumented environment, right? So if you think of many of the things that have gone on in Second Life, Second Life has almost unfailingly shown us where some of the next web technology will go, right? Mm. I mean, if you think about it, you've seen like, oh, I forget it. You've seen Shaker on Facebook, right?
I have more heard of it than seen it, I'm afraid.
Well, it couldn't be more Second Life-y if it tried, but it's just, you know, and the idea of, I mean, you see, what's interesting in a way is Second Life, while it hasn't got mainstream traction and probably in this form is unlikely to unless something changes, it's you know, it's unlikely to be something, I think, that is done every day by masses and masses of people. But it is extraordinarily amazing kind of, you know, think tank for how people want to experience a connected world. Because, you see, that's, at the minute, the instrumentation of the real world is very sparse, right? We basically do have a sensor in our pockets, that's the phone, right? But we're not at the point that we live in a networked world in the way that Second Life is. So what I find most fascinating about Second Life is it's kind of the preview of a lot of possibility. It's a possibility space for things that we really will be doing in real life very soon. And sorry, go on.
I was going to say one of the main serious features of Second Life, and indeed, not to forget OpenSim, which we cover a lot here, is prototyping. You know, you know, as much as you can see a wonderful art exhibit or some wonderful fashions created in Second Life, you can also see some pretty serious 3D prototypes of things that will be built in organic space. And, you know, this is a cheap way to do it. And, of course, over and beyond 3D modeling, it's got human engagement. You can really go in there and sort out kind of all the bits. So, you know, as a working space, these platforms are very valuable. And
yes, they are extraordinarily valuable for that, I think. Yes.
The other thing I remember about you is you were always, I think you were the first person I literally followed across the bridge into open simulators. You were around in the days when Linden Lab and IBM actually had an arrangement where we could teleport out of Second Life into OpenSim.
Can you not do that anymore?
No, I'm afraid you can't. Second Life these days is a walled garden.
I didn't know this. That's not good.
When Philip stepped down as CEO of Second Life, Mark Kingdom basically put paid to all the interop exercises, and we now have a new CEO in Second Life, Rod Humble, Roderick Linden, who comes from a much more gaming background. And he occurred to me a minute ago because you said until Second Life changes, and all the indications are it is going to change. You now have a basic mode, and you're going to be able to switch from basic mode to normal mode that they call advanced mode now. And they're planning to overhaul the interface again so you can just point and click to walk and make it simpler for the pedestrians. And I think one of the most interesting things he said when he came to the job was that he said, well, nobody actually seems to know what Second Life is. And I think, you know, he kind of likes the mystery that nobody quite knows what it is. He just says their job is to empower people.
Yes, interesting. I mean, I didn't know. Well, I mean, you know, I think OpenSim is enormously important because if you don't have this technology in the hands of developers to shape it in new ways, then eventually it's going to, you know, starve to death. That's why, I mean, it's just a no-brainer that if you want to really, you know, develop a technology, that it should be in the hands of lots of people. That's sort of sad that I mean, I don't know. It's probably OpenSim. They probably have a big enough community now that it doesn't matter too much. But I mean, it's sort of sad that the interop ended.
Yeah, it's become very interesting. One of the focuses in this series has been the hypergrid, which it's basically an interop system that works on across OpenSims, and OpenSim has now been taken up by a lot of players. Some are behind, you know, private OpenSims for prototyping, whatever. Some which are there's one called InWorlds, which it distinctly tries to mimic Second Life to be another Second Life, as it were, and in fact is another walled garden. And a few others, but most of them, you know, so there are a few other walled gardens out there in the system.
Right.
But most of it is hyperlinked now, so you can literally log out of one grid, type in the equivalent of an URL, and go into another grid, and with permissions and stuff like that, you can even carry your assets around with you.
Yes.
And we've spoken. We have Bruce Joy from Fastpark here, who's on taking this from another perspective entirely. But it's talking about open avatar and the mobility of assets and things like that. And we projected that we might see independent enterprise starting up to provide asset servers where you can keep virtual goods, virtual assets of one kind, on servers that will actually move around with you. And coming back to the augmented reality thing, I mean, you must already know there are devices where things like your avatar, it might be a basic one, is transportable, and you've got these games where you have transportable assets.
Yes.
Do you think this is going to be a thing of the future, the virtual goods?
I think this is actually a thing of the now, if anyone sort of puts their energy in it. Because, I mean, right now, I did see now which I do keep, my peripheral vision is still on some of this. And I did notice there's a OpenSim that's working using Unity now for the client, right?
Yes, Unity 3D. Well, there's a couple of things. One is Reaction Grid, who are an OpenSim, for example, actually have a platform called Jibe, but it's really an alternative to OpenSim. Mm-hmm. Whereas there's a company called Kitely and another one called Tipidium, which was started by Chris Collins, who's a former Linden in Australia.
Oh, yes, I have.
And the idea there seems to be to use Unity and to bring a web-friendly interface to a virtual space. They're the kind of things I call windows to the virtual world.
Now, right, I have seen that. Now, I haven't spent time, looking at this in detail, but I'll tell you where this comes together and why Unity is interesting is because Unity, basically, certainly across mobile it's a connecting tissue now between augmented reality and virtual worlds, because there's one open source stack available from Qualcomm that basically gives you the ability to create augmented reality, basically, and link it to natural feature tracking. I mean, that's not just a marker, but a photo of any image, location. And that goes all the way up to Unity 3D, which now has an augmented reality version. So you can imagine if you get your act together, you could quite easily have avatars that were both, functional in a virtual space and, in an augmented reality app, so that was a seamless experience that you basically could, have the same assets across both experiences. And that's a start to linking these experiences. So I have paid attention to that, and I'm sure we're going to see some of that soon, because, certainly, even this little experience I had last night of having this asset I'd invested a lot in, right? Mm-hmm. And there's many more assets that I think a lot of people create in virtual worlds that are extremely personal, extremely valuable. They might, they're one of, there's one thing to kind of plonk there's a simple augmented reality app that Meta.io created where you can basically plonk a dinosaur in front of, your co-workers and then pass the picture around, right? But that's a lot more interesting when it's an asset of, that you're highly invested in or something else, right? That you've created in this sort of extraordinarily rich environment of a virtual world. And I wouldn't have thought it would be if you already, had some OpenSim equivalent that, I don't know, because this whole thing of, once you go down to the browser, you use a lot of the power of the virtual world. I haven't tried any of these out.
Some of them, well, a couple of points. So, Second Life at the end of last year used a company called Gaia. The name escapes me, but they tried a web version of Second Life where it was effectively streamed. And I went in as a guest, and sort of TP'd an actual avatar to where I was, and we met up, and it actually worked surprisingly well. And I suspect some of that is, falling into the new basic version. Yeah. But just quickly, something you probably don't know, as you said, you're new to coming back to Second Life, is that within the last few weeks, Second Life has actually begun supporting Mesh. And
I did see that, yeah. So that was something we wanted so badly for so long, right?
But I actually see this as a sea change. I haven't really got used to it yet, but for the first time, you were talking about people being fond of their assets, and you come in and you've got a lot invested in your avatar. But one of the criticisms of Second Life is nobody can get it out to go anywhere else.
Right, but you can in OpenSim, right?
Yeah, you can in OpenSim, and you potentially can with the Open Avatar that Bootstrap Fastpark is starting up as open source. But uniquely, Mesh is really the first time that Second Life has actually moved from the do-it-yourself tool Zinworld model to the fact that authoring in Mesh at the moment has to be done outworld. Rather like building an OpenSim, saving an raw file, and then importing it into Second Life. Sorry, cackle in my throat there. So basically, the biggest change to Second Life here is that content is now going to be authored outside Second Life to a great extent and brought into the environment. And while the advantage here is if you author out of world, you can obviously not only deploy to Second Life, but deploy to all sorts of other platforms too. So it has benefits there. But coming back to your thing about Unity, that of course supports Mesh as well. Yes. So you can actually see a point where avatars and content could be created in a way that they will be on the web through a Unity platform, but also be importable into fully immersive.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some very interesting things one could sort of experiment with now. I'm just putting in a URL for this SDK stack from Qualcomm because it's all free and that's the stack that uses Unity. And I think it's getting there that we could start doing some very interesting things across mobile and virtual worlds, right? That don't so much aim at putting the immersive experience on a mobile phone, because that's kind of inappropriate, right? But giving us a way to share what we like most about our immersive experiences when we're in a kind of, in a mobile situation where we just want to, mobile experience really has to happen very quickly. It's not, it's something you want to be able to do wherever you are when, and whatever you are doing, right? And I do think there's, we're beginning to, I just saw a little message come in. We're beginning to have a chance to kind of work across these different tools. I mean, it is super early, but did you just send me a message or I didn't?
Oh, sorry, no, I was just typing in Skype to Born Dozer to see if there's any questions coming in.
Sorry, yeah. So it's early, but that's an open source stack. They've got all the basics for like basically doing some interesting gluing of assets to the world, and they've got Unity at the top, so you can do some design work. But I don't think anyone's really got to the point that they've thought through what are the interesting interactions, right? We've been so busy defining what these spaces are, right? Like, as you pointed out at the beginning of our discussion, for a long time, we would just spend a lot of time saying, well, what is great about an immersive space, right? And certainly in augmented reality, I've spent a lot of time saying, well, what's so great about augmented reality that defines it, as a different experience from an immersive experience? But actually, where these things become super interesting is where you think of how the interactions empower each other, right? Because quite frankly, we as human beings, we enjoy this range of communication. It's not we all want to be stuck in one or the other mode, right? But I think it's as you say, there's still a lot of work to do in the spaces themselves. I mean, you're right, OpenSim's maturing, but I mean, I think there's a lot to be done to make this a sort of mainstream experience. It does sound like Second Life is beginning to figure out ways to, you know, have like different levels of the experience so more people can, you know, the barrier to entry is lower for some people without I mean, that's from what you were saying. It seems like where it's going, there's going to be levels of viewer. Is that what you're saying? So that some people can...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly beginner and advanced user. Whether they have any more in between, I don't know. But maybe I think they want to make it more modular, and you know, so that you can customize it maybe for different things you want to use it for.
I do think, I think it's interesting too that it's Rod Humble, right? He's exploring the gaming potentials of Second Life, because that was one of the other big debates early on, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, you know, Second Life and any immersive space like it, you know, where you can create in it, it's all things to all people, really. So,
but it was
gaming.
It was particularly kind of, you know, like that was a very kind of sore point that people felt that it really wasn't a gaming experience or not conducive to that. But you see, I think like all these things, it just takes time, and maturity changes everything. And I think he's actually right. You're going to see some aspects. The game potential of Second Life may well come out.
Well, one thing, this actually is already happened in OpenSim. A company called Dayton in the UK helped develop the code for it. But apparently he's very interested in non-player characters, kind of AOs, bots and things. So you could, say, create a game in the world with pre-programmed characters and things like that. And I mean... I have been to so many conferences, I'm sure you have, where somebody will rightly stand up and, you know, say, well, people stop calling Second Life a game, because of course it isn't. But, you know, the fact is, it is a vast space. And, you know, in the same way you have entertainments like music in here, you can have role-playing games. It's all part of a vast environment that mirrors, you know, our aspirations in the world, so to speak.
Yes. And actually, I think predicts some things very interestingly, because I mean, you talked about this thing about the mirror worlds, right? The Twinity and the others. You see, I think, I mean, that's just, you know, one, you know, those are sort of experiments in something much more limited. And I think it is this, because of the kind of, you know, the user-generated content and the flexibility, even if it's not open in Second Life, it's more open in OpenSim, that it's an extraordinary playground for what a world of ubiquitous computing will be like. And as you're pointing out, it's like this idea that, I mean, in reality, I live in New York City, right? Our lives are run by these bots, actually, because the most instrumented part of the real world is, you know, Wall Street and all of the trading that goes on, where these, I don't know if you've ever seen these Nanex visualizations where these, like, trading bots basically are constantly being fired off to, you know, to go after microsecond trades, right? And it's, our world is, you know, like, basically transforming into a world where a lot of the, you know, the networking intelligence that it organizes it is actually operating beyond our perception. But what's interesting about Second Life, because it is a completely networked environment, I mean, you could actually explore things like these trading economies and in ways you can't in the real world, because it's completely, you know, instrumented. So
I think they did that. There have actually been things like, I think Metanomics did something like that at one point, but also there was an installation in Second Life that managed to track the spread of flu viruses and things like that. You know, they simply simulated it at speeds and in ways that, you know, just can't be done. And Babbage Linden's carbon goggles. I mean, that's really futuristic. You know, that is going to be, you know, if we ever get the AR contact lenses or glasses, yes, we will have one of the things where we can look at something and see how much energy or how many awful things went on to make it, right? So that's, go on. Yeah, actually, I'm going to come. The other things I was going to come to before we round up is also gesture technology, which is coming in too.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
I'll just take a quick break, and I'm just going to go over to our colleague at NBC, Dusa Dragonash, who's been sort of watching the channel to see. Oh, actually, I think I've just got a message. No. Okay, I don't think we have any questions at the moment. If anybody, to viewers at home watching the channel or anybody in the audience here, if you have any questions, do feel free to let Dusa Dragonash know. Or anybody in the audience here, if you have any questions, do feel free to let Dusa. Okay, I've now got an echo coming in from somewhere.
You think it's from me? No.
Okay. Okay, it's gone. Yeah, I think I don't think we have any questions. So it was a voice channel opening up, creating a bit of hiss. Okay, let's just carry on where I was going then. I kind of think of you as somebody who is really pretty much in tune with the way things are going. I mean, I in some ways am still, I've got an interest in all these things, but I'm still really occupied with immersive spaces and things. But I noticed that I think we're increasingly going to see things like we already see web services delivered via television. We see things like the new Connect boxes where gesture technology replaces mouse and keyboards. You can just flap around and things will hopefully do basic things you want. And of course we've got the pad computing, which again it's you've got to touch the screen, but by and large it's sort of more toward that sort of gesturing technology. There have been a few experiments to bring it into places like Second Life, where it will be done with a webcam can sense what you're doing, and your avatar can mimic your face up and down or your moving arms. But that is one area. I wonder if the idea of information more than television starting to come down our television sets, and I'm very interested in television, could actually represent a fundamental change. For example, if your interface on your television set is operated by gesture technology, and the menu took the form of a virtual environment, because there will be so many components that you can bring up, not just television programming, but widgets, overlays, you name it. Whether that, for example, is an avenue of technology that I wonder if it's going to bring the immersion back, because in a way, although it's not engaging and interactive, television has always been the ultimate form of immersion for the last so many decades. But we're getting towards the end. So what I'd really like to do with that, what I just said in mind really, is sort of tap your brain, as it were, for your thoughts about the future and where you think, what you'd like to see, and possibly what you suspect the biggest changes are going to be in this whole field.
Okay. I'm glad you brought up gesture technologies. Ooh, I'm looking, my sound's a bit hot, but maybe I'll turn it down a little bit. Okay, I think gesture is fascinating. I know that, Mitch Kapoor was doing work really early on before we saw Connect, and I think it has a really lot of exciting possibilities for virtual worlds. Now, the thing about gesture technology is that it's a lot related to form factor. I mean, it works really well on a certain size of screen, right? And what's interesting, I think, about the way, say, Second Life and OpenSim is experienced at the minute, I don't know, what size screen do you use for Second Life? This is an interesting question.
It's about 36-inch, I guess. Yes,
so it's a little below where gesture technologies really kick in. So I think it's gesture and virtual world is a match made in gesture technology and virtual worlds are a match made in heaven. But at the current way we use virtual worlds, which is primarily, it's still kind of a niche market, right, where very few people actually do much on a big screen with their virtual world, do they? I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen Second Life used in that way, right? But you can imagine where that could go. It could be really interesting.
I personally have, I've got a thing where I can actually switch the display through to big screen TV. And obviously, if I've gone in world and settled in to, say, a concert and I'm going to be listening for an hour, that is actually quite a fun thing to do because I can then go and relax.
Right.
But by pushing yourself away and watching the big screen, you reduce the interactivity you can have, you know, for example, in text chat or something like that. But, you know, it's...
Yes. And that, yes, exactly. But that's where, you know, obviously you're going to want the whole experience to work. You're exactly right. At the minute, it doesn't work because what's really fun about Second Life is this integration of the text chat, the voice, the image, being able to, you know, basically use this complex array of menus, right? You know how that is. That's not really a gesture experience, right?
It's a learning experience, for sure.
It's a learning experience. But this is where I think, you know, I don't know anything whether this is where Rod Humble's going, but if you think about it, if you start developing experiences on this technology that relate to a big screen and a gesture interaction, there's a lot of things that come to mind and that would be super fun and actually would be an amazing experience. Virtual worlds and gestures, match made in heaven, but we don't really have, certainly Second Life at the moment, it's not really designed for that kind of interaction yet. But I suspect we'll see that, and that's something that's going to be quite a game changer. If you think about it, the interaction really is a lot based on form factor. Like mobile phones work wonderfully for touch screens, right? But you wouldn't really want a touch experience on a big screen, right? And mouse works extremely well for the form factor, sort of about up to, you know, what is it, PC, you know, PC up to, I don't know when mice start tailing off, but they start tailing off pretty close to where gesture kicks in, right? So I think it's that. It's like Connect is awesome, you know, technology, because we're just at the beginning of that. And, you know, thank goodness it went open source early. But I think, you know, it's like evolving these experiences so that, you know, I mean, just adding gesture to Second Life as it is now kind of wouldn't make sense, really, because of the kind of, you know, the menus.
Yeah, it's also to do with, I mean, it's built into systems. You know, there'll be a wider range of drivers you can download to run it. And, you know, it's like you know, it came out, the drivers were available, and before you knew it, Linden Lab incorporated the drivers into their preferences. So if something is commonplace enough, there's I saw an advert for something the other day that you plug into the Kinect to alter the focal distance. It's designed for Kinect users who are in small rooms who are closer to their screens than the ordinary Kinect bar. Hopefully not. I really hope not.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for the future, right? In my book, and I think there's a serious missing link that I think will actually enable a lot of things for virtual worlds. I think I can't. I thought who's the is it? Who did the hypergrid?
I was about to say Maria Coppola. No, Krista Lopez.
Yes.
Yeah.
Krista.
Yeah.
Krista has a very, very deep understanding of sort of communications and basically the state of the internet. And there's something she says, which I think is really at the heart of it, that there's something fundamental about the way the internet is set up is in that it's not actually centered around people. We had to do an enormous amount of work to put people at the center of the web, right? And that's how you saw things like Facebook sort of get such enormous traction, because they gave people the tools they need, right? And virtual worlds, one thing about virtual worlds is they really do put people at the center of the experience.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Again, this is what I'm saying, they kind of prefigure the future ones. I think that as we begin to develop ways that people are really at the center of their data, we can do with virtual worlds in terms of these dreams our assets across different experiences, isn't it? But anyway, that's my big thought, is that this virtual worlds have prefigured a networked experience with people at the center of it. And we're going to figure out a way to let people be at the center of their own assets. And I look forward to it, because one or two private companies, control all the assets. It's just not going to be the way it works. So I look forward to that. And I think, it's amazing that, virtual worlds and Second Life are giving us the opportunities to explore this now. Bye.
It goes all too quickly. It's been wonderful having you here and seeing you again, because it has been a while.
It has been. Even if I'm not in my best shape,
exactly.
I will tweak the avatar up. And thank you. I've really enjoyed talking. A pleasure to be here. I mean, you just can't do everything. And as you say, I've been very, very busy with other projects. So, but it's not that I don't think about where all of these, the virtual worlds, augmented reality, and all of this lines up. I'm seeing Foxy says that her avatar is beginning to show her age. Mine is, isn't it embarrassing? Terrible to age as an avatar. It's exactly what
well, I had that certain noob look around me for many years, and people would come up to me and say, well, when are you going to change that avatar? Because you get a look you like, and I'll stick with it.
I know,
reluctant to change, aren't we?
Yep, I know. Well.
Okay.
I would be happy to come back, and, it was nice to see Second Life looking good.
Okay, well, thanks, Tish, an awful lot. And we will be back with the next show in 2 weeks' time, confirmed, but I'm going to leave you in suspense. Let's just say I think we'll be looking at a very serious best practice example from somebody who's worked in Second Life and in front of it, so to speak, and for clients ranging from, domestic. You'll find out more in 2 weeks' time. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you.